What is up, everybody? Daniel Rock 08 back again on a video. 1997 year in review continues with WWF SummerSlam, Heart and Soul. Of all the shows, of all the pay-per-views I've watched so many damn shows. I have to say SummerSlam 1997 is one of my personal favorite shows, and it's one of the shows I have probably seen a lot more of. I have seen SummerSlam 1997. All the shows, I've probably seen SummerSlam 1997 probably a lot more than some other shows. I would say WrestleMania 19, WrestleMania 17, WrestleMania 14, SummerSlam 2002, Survivor Series 2002. SummerSlam 1997 would probably be up there as far as much as I watched this show. I love this show to death. Overall, it's one of the best SummerSlams out there, top 3, and you're going to see why. Heart and Soul. We start off with a fabulous opener, fantastic opener. Whoever voice acted for these openings in the new generation, especially 1996 all the way to WrestleMania 14, great shit, great shit. Now, this SummerSlam is in the Meadowlands of New Jersey, which I think is now the Izod Center, the Ion Center, the Izod Center, whatever the fuck it's called. It's the arena where they went apeshit for Dolph Ziggler when he won the title after WrestleMania 29. I'm pretty sure. The Hart Foundation. All 4 of the 5 members who have matches have a stipulation involved if they lose their matches. Brian Pillman, if he loses against Goldust, he has to wear a dress. If Davey Boy Smith loses against Ken Shamrock, he has to eat dog food. If Owen Hart loses against Stone Cold Steve Austin, he loses the Intercontinental Championship. But if Stone Cold loses to Owen, Stone Cold has to kiss Owen Hart's ass. But the biggest stipulation of them all, the one Hart Foundation member who has the most to gain and the most to lose is Bret Hart. Everything is on the line there. If Bret Hart wins, he's the WWF champion. If he loses, however, Bret Hart will no longer wrestle in the United States of America. Shawn Michaels is the special referee in the main event, and it's been added, if he does not call it down the middle, Shawn Michaels will never again wrestle in the United States of America. Very, very interesting stipulations throughout this entire night. So let's kickstart off. Mankind defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley in a steel cage match in the opener. This is a great steel cage match and the best opening match for a SummerSlam. Great match. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Mankind with an elbow drop off of the steel cage. Crowd going nuts. He drops back down, and then the Dude Love music hits, and he goes out dancing like he's Dude Love. An 8.5 out of 10. Now, keep in mind, this is before D-Generation X. Because this actually happens very early in August. August 3rd, by the way. So this is before D-Generation X. Goldust defeats Brian Pillman in a okay match. I give it a 6 out of 10. An okay match. The finish is kind of botchy. Goldust went for a sunset flip over Brian Pillman. And Brian Pillman was supposed to reverse it so Marlena can hit him in the face with her purse or something. But the thing is Brian Pillman was kind of a little too far away from the ropes, so he had to drag Goldust to the spot. Anyways, they made up for it. I always liked watching Brian Pillman, and it's so sad that we lose Brian Pillman 2 months after this match. I actually think this is his final pay-per-view match. I don't know if he actually had a match at Ground Zero. So, this is probably Brian Pillman's last match on pay-per-view. A 6 out of 10. His feud with Goldust most certainly was his last feud. And it got pretty interesting. After this, Brian Pillman would take Marlena away from Goldust, and they started doing those Brian Pillman Triple X files, which was pretty scandalous and pretty controversial at the time. Next up, we have the Legion of Doom defeating the Godwins, and in typical LOD match, it's basically LOD kicks your fucking ass and beats your head in, and they win. And, it's just, if you like LOD and you like watching them smash and kick people's ass, this is for you. A 5 out of 10. There you go. LOD for the win. They were not the tag team champions. I actually forgot who the tag team champions were at this point in time. It might have been the Headbangers, if I'm not mistaken, actually. Next up, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, takes on Ken Shamrock in a pretty solid match as well, much like Goldust and Brian Pillman. This one ends in disqualification. I give it a 6 out of 10. Davey Boy Smith gets a disqualification victory when Ken Shamrock basically goes fucking crazy. Davey Boy Smith, there's a big giant can of dog food on the commentator's table. So Davey Boy Smith, he grabs like a big chunk of the dog food and slaps it right in Ken Shamrock's face, and Shamrock just goes fucking crazy and beats the shit out of Davey Boy Smith, gets himself disqualified. He chokes him out. And then in comes Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe. Here comes all these referees. The match is called off. The European title was on the line, by the way. Davey Boy Smith retained, obviously. Ken Shamrock beats the shit out of Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe, and a couple of referees. And it was pretty sweet. Ken Shamrock, he just was unstable. He was a maniac. And the crowd went fucking crazy when he did his loud roar taunt. It was great stuff. I will have to say this. A lot of people like to say that Billy Gunn was probably the most underrated star of the Attitude Era. Well, we're transitioning into the Attitude Era at this point in time. And I feel that the most underrated superstar of the Attitude Era has to go to Ken Shamrock. Yes, you had Steve Austin, you had The Rock, you had The Undertaker. At this point, you have Steve Austin, you have Bret, you have Undertaker, you have Shawn Michaels, and eventually you get Mankind in the main event, Triple H, and so on, and The Rock, and so on and so forth. But you know what? It actually surprises me that Ken Shamrock was not a consistent main event player. He did get his title shot against Shawn Michaels at D-Generation X's In Your House. But he wasn't a consistent main eventer. I'm not really sure why. Maybe because of the star power at the time. A 6 out of 10, a good match. The worst match on the card and the only bad thing about this show is Los Boricuas versus the Disciples of Apocalypse. This is during the whole huge faction warfare that was going on. At this point in time, there were so many goddamn factions, it was fucking crazy. You had the Hart Foundation. You had the Nation of Domination. Farouk fires Savio Vega, who finds Los Boricuas. He also fires Crush, who finds DOA. So now you have 4 factions, and in 2 weeks you have D-Generation X. So then you have 5 factions, and there's there's others. On WCW, of course, you had the NWO, and you had so many factions. On ECW, you had the Triple Threat, and there's so many fucking factions, but WWF had it worse. So you had this brand fucking faction warfare shit going on here. Los Boricuas versus DOA. And to be honest, every fucking time I see this match, I skip. So, this match, it's bad. It's a 2 out of 10. It's probably the most forgettable match of SummerSlam history. And there you go. Next. Alright. We get to the Intercontinental Championship match. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Owen Hart in a phenomenal Intercontinental Championship match. This match had all the potential to be one of the greatest matches in SummerSlam history. And it actually was going to be one of the greatest matches in SummerSlam history. Until the finish. And the finish happens to be, and a lot of people know this finish, but it ends up being one of the scariest, one of the most cringiest, and one of the most heart-stopping, holy shit, what the fuck is going on here? Please tell me he is okay moments in wrestling. Owen Hart goes for a sit-out tombstone pile driver, shades of The Undertaker. Steve Austin's head was about that far below Owen Hart's ass, and he gets dropped right on his head, and he breaks his neck. Not only that, but he is paralyzed for 40 seconds. And it's some of the scariest 40 seconds, 45 seconds in the history of wrestling. This moment, it's only about a minute long, but it's the longest 1 minute in Steve Austin's life, the longest minute in a lot of people's, in Vince McMahon's life, because this is supposed to be his next top star. What the fuck is this? So, in one of the scariest moments of all time, Steve Austin gets dropped right on his head, breaks his neck, and is paralyzed for a very few amount of seconds. Owen Hart, he showboats to the crowd. He knows he done fucked up. He knows it. So he has to stall for time. And this moment makes Stone Cold Steve Austin from one of the hottest stars into already at this point in time one of the most beloved superstars in his age, of the ages. Steve Austin, he gets feeling back in his neck. He crawls. He tries feeling his hands. You know, he moves his fingers. He moves his fingers as much as possible. And he crawls. And he crawls. And he does the shittiest schoolboy pin of all time. However, he does get the pinfall. He gets the Intercontinental title. And even though he does have one shitty-looking schoolboy pin, you have to know he has a broken neck. However, Steve Austin becomes an even bigger superstar. The guts, the fortitude, the amount of guts and courage of Stone Cold Steve Austin, it's unfathomable. On this particular night, on August 3rd, 1997, on this particular night, Stone Cold Steve Austin was 98% lucky and 2% tough. But by God, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the worst case scenario did not happen. Stone Cold Steve Austin manages to get the Intercontinental title strap from Owen Hart. 2 referees come to his aid, and you can just hear from Jim Ross, you can hear the quivering voice from Vince McMahon. He is scared to death for Stone Cold Steve Austin. And everyone in the crowd, the 20,000 people in the Meadowlands, is scared as shit too. Steve Austin, he hoists the Intercontinental title strap in the air, and he drops it, and he barely stands up. He barely stands up, and he has 2 referees holding him out and carrying him out. Carrying him out. Now, it just shows you how gutsy and how amazing Stone Cold Steve Austin really is. On this night, he was 98% lucky, 2% tough. And you know what? This makes him a much bigger superstar because it just shows you that he is the toughest son of a bitch in the world. Everything they did with him at King of the Ring 96, heading into Survivor Series, heading into the Royal Rumble, into WrestleMania. Now, here he is, the biggest star in his time period. On this night, Stone Cold Steve Austin, he surpasses The Undertaker. He surpassed Bret Hart. He is the biggest top star in the industry at this point now, next to the NWO. One hell of a match up until the finish. I still give it an 8.5, but it's the scariest minute. It's one of the scariest minutes in the history of wrestling. You know, people talk about how great these basketball athletes are and how great these football athletes are. Well, you know what? I still believe that these professional wrestlers are the toughest men in the industry, in their profession of all time. LeBron James, he gets carried off by 6 referees because of a leg cramp. Stone Cold Steve Austin walks away with a broken freaking neck, still wins the match, and only has 2 referees just keeping him steady, just keeping him balanced as they walked him out. And he still comes to the ring the next night, and he still comes on TV and still kicks people's ass. Hell, he is so tough and he's so damn amazing that a lot of people didn't even realize that his neck was fucking broken. And he didn't even get surgery for 2 fucking years. So you can take your LeBron James, you can take your Stephen Curry, you can take your Tom Brady, you can shove it up your ass, because this is what superstars are made of. Stone Cold Steve Austin, again, it's the scariest minute in wrestling, but one hell of a match. And just thank God the worst case scenario did not occur. Even though Stone Cold Steve Austin had to change his ring ability, still had to change his moveset and so far and so on and so forth, and how he maps out matches and so on. He had to change his in-ring stuff. Doesn't matter. Stone Cold Steve Austin is one of the biggest stars of all time, and you can see why on this particular night. Anyways, Steve Austin wins the Intercontinental title, and he gets rushed to the hospital. He does break his neck, but again, the worst case scenario did not occur. The worst case scenario was him becoming paralyzed. Alright, main event time. Shawn Michaels is the special guest referee. It's Bret Hart versus The Undertaker for the WWF Championship. And it's one of the best championship matches in SummerSlam history. Bret Hart, if he loses this match, he no longer can wrestle in the United States of America. Undertaker loses, he loses the title. If Shawn Michaels does not call it down the middle, he no longer wrestles in the United States of America. This is a phenomenal match, one of the best main events in any pay-per-view there is. Bret Hart gets the victory, gets the championship after Undertaker spits right in the face of Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels with a steel chair shot swings. I bet it was Bret Hart that spit in the face of Shawn Michaels. I'm fucking sorry. Bret Hart spits in Shawn Michaels' face, swinging a miss with a steel chair, hits the Undertaker in the skull with it. He gets busted open. Bret Hart covers him. 1, 2, 3. Bret Hart leads with the title. Undertaker chases after Shawn Michaels, and that will continue their feud when we see the likes of Kane in the Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood. This is a great match. The storylines going on here are so great. Bret Hart being this hero now turned villain, public enemy number 1 in the United States. Shawn Michaels being the pompous asshole that he is. And The Undertaker, the secret is out. Kane is alive! Kane is alive! Great match, a 9 out of 10. Overall, SummerSlam 1997, I give a 7 out of 10. It's one of the greatest top 3 SummerSlams you're ever going to find. You had so many great moments, so many great matches. Mankind versus Triple H, Steve Austin versus Owen Hart. The finish is bad. It's scary as shit, but it makes Stone Cold Steve Austin one of the greatest stars of all time. Bret Hart versus Undertaker. Yeah, DOA versus Los Boricuas is shit, but other than that, a great SummerSlam. And I'll catch you next time for ECW's Hardcore Heaven and WCW's Road Wild. All here, 1997, year in review for WWF. It will be Ground Zero. Goodbye.